Friends, Romans, countrymen, beautiful people, welcome to a rating video for Axton. I've been meaning to get around to this video for a while, just to prove that Axton is much better at rating than people tend to think. Now, it's not because he's one of the better raters. I consider him in the bottom half of the 6 characters when it comes to rating, but it's just that most of the characters, no, all of the characters are good at rating for the most part. I'll get into the nuances of that in a second, but for now, just know that Axton is so good at rating, just like most of the characters, that he can fairly easily beat 7 of the 11 raids, and in this video I will be beating 9 of the 11 raids. The only 2 I won't be soloing will be the dragons and Voracidous, as they require more practice and skill, but I will link to legitimate runs of them. I did just want to show the binary boss kill here, but we'll go ahead and head on to Haderax. If you do want to watch that full Digistruct Peak run, I will link it in the description. Now, for Haderax here, you do want to start out with a toothpick and a retainer, which I believe dropped from the sandworms in this DLC. And I just like to run up to this rock here. This is what I find to be the easiest method. Now, I am not a particularly good Axton player, so these runs will not be the most skillful runs. But that's kind of the point, guys. Like, I'm trying to show you that with just some effort and some practice and some experience, you can beat most of these raids. So these will not be the most skillful kills. Most of these are literally just my first clears of these bosses. So just keep that in mind. Like I said, I'm not, this is literally the first time I attempted to raid with Axton for the most part. I had done a little bit of raiding with him before, but you know guys, these bosses, you just have to practice them. You know, just think of them, yes, they are very hard for a Borderlands boss, but they're about on par with like a tough Monster Hunter or a tough Souls boss. So if you come in with a little patience, you can take them on. Now, yes, they're designed around being fought as a group, but if you're a solo player, you can still take them on even on OP10. And again, I'll elaborate on those statements here in a minute. For now, I'll describe what I'm doing in this fight here. For Haderax specifically, the fire conference call is probably the best weapon. It just absolutely shreds him. He's also a good way to get the conference call. In my opinion, he's actually the best way to get it, unless you can moonshot farm the warrior. I was never good at that. But you can see right here, I'm just biding my time waiting for Haderax to come out here. You just want to keep damaging the top of his crit spot there, and eventually after you do enough damage, he'll get knocked out. Now it can take multiple cycles, but you can survive pretty easily here, and if you have a Moxie weapon, it's even easier. So whichever hole he does not interact with is the hole he'll rise out of. So see, he came out of this hole, and he went into that second hole, so now I know he's going to spawn in the third hole. So I'll just shoot his crit spot, and this will knock him over, and then I can finish him off with the conference call. He's very hard to slag, which is really, really frustrating. Gearbox did that to incentivize, you know, more group strategies, I think. But it is pretty frustrating. But you can see what I'm doing. I'm just trying to use my turrets to rely on aggro relief. I'm using the B shield for damage, trying to keep him slagged. And if you need to, you can use a transfusion grenade to get your health up, or you can use a Moxie weapon to get your health up more easily. I actually find that transfusion grenades slag him a bit better than the crossfire grenades. Maybe I've just had bad luck with them, but that has been my experience. I do really enjoy this fight. It's pretty easy when you know what to do. Again, I'm not a very experienced Axton player, so this was a pretty sloppy kill. But again, I'm kind of doing that to show that you don't have to be, you know, a god tier player to do this. So as soon as you knock him over, you just aim right there where I'm aiming, and the conference call will melt him. The Sandhawk is good as well. You can check out my other 0 kills. I've killed Haderax several times. And he does drop really good loot. So if you can just emulate the strategy I did there, pretty much anybody can do that. And yeah, this fight is pretty easy once you understand what you need to do. Now we'll head on to Dexy here. Axton does have really good synergy against Dexy. He can actually kill Dexy faster than anyone else. This is because his grenade damage bonuses are the only way, other than Death Mark, to make Dexy take extra damage when the boils pop. What I mean by that is, you know, normally Dexy only takes damage from a boil pop, and there's no way to increase that. For whatever reason, Gearbox magical code reasons, if you have increases to your grenade splash damage, like such as that Axton has, he will actually take more damage when you pop a boil. So I don't know why it works that way, but I'm not complaining. So Axton can take him out the fastest. Now you do still end up having to wait for the boils to spawn, which is kind of annoying. But the Lady Fist and the Bee Shield will make quick work of them when they do spawn. Guys, Dexiduous is not a hard fight at all. He has one dangerous attack, which is the Poison Bomb attack. And I've literally seen people compare him to Voracidous, which is just insane and really shows you that this community just so often does not know what it's talking about. I'm sorry to sound rude, but the simple fact of the matter is, you can only think Dexiduous is as hard as Voracidous if you've literally never fought him. And if you've never fought either one of them, why are you, giving your opinion on it? But see, that Poison Bomb attack is dangerous. You want a Bee Shield with a Caustic immunity, and if you can't get it, then you'll just have to avoid it. As long as you stand far back away from him, it's not really a threat. Or if you have another Bee Shield or another shield with a corrosive immunity, you can switch to that. And movement speed bonuses are good here too, so you can outrun it with stuff like Ma has Rough Rider and Fleet. But yeah, pretty easy fight. You can literally just hide under that bridge, under that lodge if you need to, and then you can just go buy ammo. But be careful when you buy ammo because the poison bombs will hit you through the walls, so be really careful with that. But I got quite a few drops from him there, you can see. Here's a matching grip fire chopper. So I definitely would adjust to Dexiduous for the design-wise. So I do think is a bit boring, but hard, brutally hard he is not. Just takes a little bit of practice. And again, Vermi, another very easy raid boss. For the most part, the raid bosses are just nowhere near as difficult as people make them out to be. So I did want to go ahead and kind of elaborate on them in this video. So Vermi, he has that crit spot there, and you can just try to aim for it when you have the opportunity. You won't always. This is the easiest place to spawn him. The final round of the final wave of Creature Slaughter round 2 has a guaranteed ultimate badass Varkid, and he has a 10% chance to turn into Vermivorous. Vermivorous also has a 20% chance to drop the Norfleet, which is awesome. And the good news about fighting him in this arena is you have access to cover and second wind opportunities. So again, Vermi, very, very easy raid boss, absolutely does not have to be glitched. The only downside is he can't be slagged, so keep that in mind. You also don't need perfect gear for the most part, guys. This is not even a flying Sandhawk. This is a gibbed character because I actually don't have much experience with Axton or Mai. Actually, on my computer, on my PC save, I only have a level 30 Axton and a level 50 Mai. And then other than that, the only gameplay time I have on them is what you guys have seen in my videos. So it's not like I'm doing this because I'm a super experienced player, which with Zero you could argue. I am very experienced with him, but here with Axton and Mai, I'm just not very experienced. But with just a little bit of practice, I was able to beat most of these raid bosses. Now, I was just trying some different things out. Like I said, I'm not sure what Axton's best options are, so I was just sticking to the usual choices. To make raiding easier on yourself, you do want to stick to meta options. A lot of people complain that there wasn't considerations made for solo players and that the raid bosses are too hard because of that. And I can actually even agree with that criticism. I actually do agree that the raid bosses are too hard, and that it would have been better if more considerations were made for solo players. I totally agree with that. It's kind of like old school Monster Hunter where the monsters didn't have single player scaling and stuff. But now that said, the game does absolutely give you the tools you need to beat these bosses, and you'll see that. So Haderax, Dexiduous, Vermivorous are all not that difficult. Haderax can be harder if you can't one-cycle him. He'll start moving around and regenerating health and stuff, and you'll have to apply a dot to him to get him to stop. But again, once you practice the fight a bit and know what you're doing, he's not bad at all. Haderax I enjoy a lot. Dexiduous and Vermivorous are okay. They're kind of boring though. And in my opinion, Vermivorous should be guaranteed to drop a Norfleet because he's so hard to spawn. He's very easy to beat, but he's just hard to spawn, So even though this is gibbed gear, this is a gibbed character, I don't use perfect gear for the most part. There may have been some times that I forgot and forgot to not make it perfect, but for the most part I don't use perfect gear because it's just not necessary. So anyway, here we are with Pyro Pete. Axton doesn't have any special synergies against him, so you just kind of want to B-Hawk. I think I used the Lauda at some points. You do want to use the Amigo Sincero to shoot his face shield off. The Trespasser will also work, but it's not as strong. But yeah, I totally agree with a lot of criticisms of the raid bosses, that they have design flaws. Like, there is so much stuff I would change about them. And I would make them more friendly for solo players. But overall, I really love them, and they're a big part of why I love Borderlands 2. Especially for Zero. I mean, I like raiding with Axton and Maya, but I love raiding with Zero. So again, I'm not very experienced with Axton. This was my first kill on Pete with him. So I was just trying out different stuff and seeing what would work. For soloing OP10 raid bosses, if you're even going to attempt that, that is the hardest challenge in this entire series, right? You will want to rely on meta gear, B-Shield, Sandhawk, Conference Call, Lady Fist, Leadstorm, Lyuda, Pimpernel, all that kind of stuff. Now, that said, I have done a lot of challenge runs where I don't use meta setups. I've beat multiple raid bosses with OP0 gear, I've beat multiple raid bosses with no red text gear, but that kind of stuff, those are challenge runs, and it does take a long time, you know. So I'll kind of give my thoughts on how I would change these bosses, but the main thing I'm disputing is the difficulty level of these bosses and the idea that every character has to use glitches to solo every OP10 raid boss. That is just objectively, verifiably false. So I think everyone knows Salvador would be the best raider, Zero would be the second best. I think most people would agree with that. And they're both really good, right? They can solo most raids no problem. I would actually consider Maya to be the third best raider. I say that because she can slag with her action skill, which is actually really good, and then she can apply Cloud Kill from just damaging an enemy. So like if you're holding a Moxie weapon, she can easily get her health back that way. She's also obviously really good with the B-Hawk, and Thought Lock can actually be really nice for aggro relief, for stuff like during the Dragons fight. So for that reason, Maya is actually quite a bit better at raiding than people give her credit for. And I missed some stuff, I'll talk about that more in the Maya raiding video. I think most people consider Krieg to be the worst raider, and from what I've seen that's probably true. Although again, even he can beat most of them. I'll talk about that in a second. Gage is the one that I'm not sure about. I can't imagine that with no stacks of... or I imagine that if you come in with max Anarchy, she's going to be pretty good at raiding. So she might be fourth, or depending on how good she is, maybe even third. I would consider Axton fifth and Krieg sixth. Now that said, Axton is still plenty competent at raiding, and you're seeing that. His turrets can draw aggro and apply slag, which is really nice, and he has grit. Axton also has the Tiny Tina alignment columns, which can boost grit to 11 points, and the Chaotic Evil one will give you critical damage and fire rate, so it's pretty good for raiding as well. And then Axton does have a couple of special synergies, like he can kill Dexy faster, and he can actually deal a huge chunk of damage to Hyperius and Voracidous with his Tedior Shucks, even though he can't kill them anymore. So for all those reasons, he does have some synergies, but I would probably consider him 5th place raider. Again, if Gage is better than I'm thinking or worse than I'm thinking, I might swap those rankings around a little bit. But yeah, for now, I would say 1st place is Salvador, 2nd place is Zero. They're both incredibly good. They don't, you know, I think everyone knows that. 3rd place would be Maya, she's better than people think. 4th place would be Gage, 5th place would be Axton, and 6th place would be Krieg. You can see for Pyro Pete, there's not really much strategy to talk about. You lead him around the arena in a circle, and when he's about to do the Nova, you just break line of sight. If he does hit you with a Nova, you wash off. I prefer Fountain 1, because I think the enemies there are easier, but he's another very easy fight. I enjoy it a lot, more so with Zero, but yeah, a difficult fight, I cannot agree with that. Now again, I'm not saying these fights are easy, guys, but I'm saying if you think of them like a hard Souls fight, or like a hard Monster Hunter fight, and you're willing to put in a little bit of practice, you really can beat most of them without too much trouble. Now I would say if you're an average player or a casual player, you shouldn't even be playing on OP10, but if you're going to, yeah, you're gonna have to put in some practice to beat these bosses. And now while you don't need perfect gear, you're definitely incentivized to get good gear. For example, the Caustic Immune B-Shield is really, really good for raiding. There are a lot of raid bosses that can inflict a corrosive dot, so it's really, really good. And I would keep an eye out for it. You know, you can get by without it, but it definitely helps a lot, right? So for Son of Crawmerax here, the Shock Conference Call is the best weapon. It just absolutely devastates him. The Shock Sandtalk is also good, but if you can, I would really recommend getting it. So this sucked right here. I got him aggroed in the corner and he was slagged, but these enemies kept attacking me, so I wasn't able to deal much damage. And here in a second, I'll get into my criticisms of the raids and how I would change them. But for advice for this fight, you want to try to keep some distance between you and Crawmerax. If he gets close to you, he'll be able to corner you and probably down you. But of course, you do have the mobs for second wins, so that's really nice. And movement speed bonuses, again, are really good for most of the raid bosses, guys, because being able to quickly get away from them, from a kill skill movement speed bonus or something like fleet or whatever, it's really, really good, so keep that in mind. Sometimes if Crawmerax is about to corner you, you can kill one of the mobs, and then you'll gain a movement speed bonus, and you'll be able to, move away from him quickly. So like I said, I am critical of the fact that they didn't give enough solo player considerations for these raid bosses, and obviously that's by design. They wanted them to be group-oriented. But, I think, for example, the newer Monster Hunter games do a really good job of making content that it incentivizes group play, but it's not too punishing for solo players either, right? Like, you definitely have an advantage as a group, but you can still do it as a solo player. One of the biggest issues with the raid bosses is their slag resistance. And it depends on the raid boss. Pete isn't too bad, for example, but like Crawmerax resists slag and he sheds it very quickly. Now obviously they did this because from a group-oriented perspective, it adds to the strategy because you can communicate and decide who's going to apply slag and different stuff like that, right? But for solo players, it's really punishing. Why not just make the slag duration scale based on number of players, right? Make it 2 seconds if you have 4 players, 4 seconds if you have 3 players, 6 seconds if you have 2 players, and like 8 seconds if you have 1 player. Why not just do something simple like that? It would make everybody win, right? And just get rid of the slag resistance. That's just really frustrating. But again, for Crawmerax, you just want to keep some distance. See, that attack can apply a corrosive dot to you. So the corrosive immunity shield is really nice. Now, again, if you can't get it, you can rely on Moxie weapons or second wins, or again, if you've got them as intended in multiplayer, they'll be much easier because teammates can revive you and stuff. Another reason these bosses are so much easier in multiplayer is because you have so much aggro relief, right? Like the raid bosses and enemies, they just have so many other targets that you can more easily get damage in. Plus, again, if you get downed, you can revive your teammates. So I will fully acknowledge that these bosses are overtuned and there are a lot of design changes I would make. Again, I'm just disputing the fact that people think they're super, super difficult and that you have to use glitches to beat them. You just don't. Except for like Voracidous, he can be beat legitimately, but I'm fine with the idea that he's so horribly designed that you practically do have to glitch him. So again, I am very critical of these fights. I'm just more fair about it and more nuanced about it than some people. And I almost died there. You never want to give up and fight for your life, guys. Just always keep fighting just in case you have that chance of getting back up. So again, I do personally really enjoy these fights, even though there are a lot of things I would change about them, and like the slag resistance is annoying to me. But, just having some kind of end-game challenge like this is super necessary for longevity. Like if these raid bosses didn't exist, which seems to be what most Borderlands players want, there just wouldn't be anything that challenging to test yourself against. And then you end up with like the pre-sequels problem, right? Great game, I love the pre-sequel, don't get me wrong. But I would love it so much more if it had OP levels and more raid bosses. So again, Shock Conference Call, best weapon for Crawmerax. If you can't get it, the Shock Sandtalk is also excellent. The Shock Lauda, Shock Pimpernel, Shock Ladyfist, those are all good for his crit spots. And that is another thing. If you're going to be attempting the hardest series of challenges in this entire franchise, which is soloing OP10 raid bosses with no badass rank, because we do have to remember people are usually voluntarily disabling their badass rank, you're going to need meta gear, or you're going to need to take longer. Like I said, you can do challenge runs, and I have done them, but that should be more reserved for really skilled players just looking to do crazy stuff, basically. From Crawmerax here, I do get a good gub out of this chest. His drops are really frustrating. Again, some of these raid bosses, the drops just were not good enough, which is another issue I have with them. Again, I'll elaborate on that in a second. So Master Yi here. I do enjoy this fight. The core mechanic is so cool, but again, in typical Gearbox fashion, they hurt the fight with other things. So, for those of you who don't know, Hyperius and Master Yi both have forced 4-player scaling. So they both have 4 times the amount of health they're supposed to have if you're a solo player. And Hyperius actually also has the double health glitch, so he has like 8 times, which is just ridiculous. But anyway, we focus on Master Yi here. What you have to do to damage him at first is kill the sandworms, and then they will spawn an acid puddle. Then you can throw a singularity to make Yi absorb them. But this fight is pretty interesting because there's actually a ton of different strategies for beating him without singularity grenades. Like whenever he does a melee attack, he will kneel and start firing his rocket, and then you can make him absorb the puddles. Like you can manipulate his behavior that way. Again, guys, I am not a great Axton player. I really don't have very much time on him, and I was able to do this fight with just some practice. Again, guys, they are hard. I fully acknowledge they are hard and that they take practice. They just are nowhere near as hard as the community makes them out to be. Now, again, I'm not very good with Axton when it comes to raiding. I kept making a mistake of I would throw my turrets in between Yi and where the acid pool would be, and then my turrets would block Yi. So I would have to reclaim them and waste more grenades. So again, these are not really meant to be particularly skillful runs. Now, if you guys haven't seen my 0 rating video, you probably have because it's my most viewed video. But in that video, those are more skillful runs for the most part, and that is my legit 0. None of that was with gibbed gear or glitches or anything. And I beat Voracidous and the dragons, so I'll link to that if you want to check it out. But you want to keep moving here. Another thing that is really good for these raid bosses is you need to develop the skill to move and shoot at the same time. That's, a skill that is common in other FPSs. It's kind of lacking in the Borderlands community, but if you can get good at that, that will be a massive benefit for you. Okay, so see how he just spawned a second shield? Now you can actually damage him with conventional weapons. But he has so much health that the fastest way to beat him is to just keep killing the sandworms. So see right there, he got caught on the turrets. That's my bad, because again, I'm not very good at this. But I can damage him with conventional weapons now. But he has so much health, especially because of the 4-player scaling, that you're better off just making him, absorb more acid pools. So the sandworms are super tanky. So you got to be really careful. Again, the caustic immune B shield is good here because they can hit you with a corrosive dot. So be really careful of that. If you're in multiplayer, of course, your teammates can revive you. If you're in solo player, it's pretty hard to get a second wind unless you already had a sandworm almost killed, because they will burrow over and over again and keep shedding slag, which is a really frustrating decision from Gearbox. So again, the core mechanic is really cool. But the forced 4-player scaling and stuff like the sandworms burrowing when you die is really frustrating and really punishing for solo players. Now, Yi is actually the easiest raid in the entire franchise to beat legitimately. I say that because if you literally just make him absorb 1 acid pool, that will eventually kill him. You can make him absorb 1 and then just go hide at the entrance, and eventually he'll die, and you technically killed him with the intended mechanics. Now I'm, engaging with the fight more than that. So, see, I ran out of singularity grenades, and since I'm not good at manipulating his behavior without him, what I do is just start running away from him and dealing conventional damage. What will happen is those acid pulls will deal damage to him forever. That never wears off, right? So I just try to keep him slagged because he does take more damage from the acid pulls while he's slagged. And then once I'm out of grenades, I just run around the arena and try to avoid the sandworms and Master Yi's attacks. Now, it's kind of difficult. Fighting him this way is pretty difficult. Again, you can just hide behind the entrance at the start, or if you don't even want to try to shoot him, because it's kind of risky, so you can see the sandworms spawning on me there, you can just keep running away from him in a circle and just keep making sure he's slagged, and that will be beating him legitimately. So go ahead and finish him off with the Lady Fist there. And also he does drop that purple shield, which will regen your health from the acid pull dots if you happen to absorb one. But there's a lot of interesting nuances to that fight. You can absorb the pulls yourself and like use a big boom blaster and beat him with like a fastball zero method. I'll link to a run that does that. So it's a pretty interesting fight with all the different ways you can manipulate his behavior. Alright, and then we'll move on to Hyperius here. Even though Axton can't kill him anymore with this, he can deal a significant chunk of his damage. Hyperius has a ton of health, but you can use an Infection Cleaner, an Expert Veteran, and the Tediore Legion's Relic, and then you'll throw several of these reloads, and then as soon as he starts taking damage, you switch over to, what was it, the Grenadier? Yeah, switch over to the Expert Grenadier and the Firebone, and then you try to slag him so he takes extra damage. You can see, even though it doesn't kill him, that is a huge chunk of damage because of how much health Hyperius has. So again, very frustrating health glitch, and then the forced 4-player scaling. So I am far from a Gearbox shill. I am very critical of a lot of their decisions. I just try to be fair about it. Now, if Hyperius actually had the amount of health he's supposed to have, I would really enjoy this fight. If you took away the Novas. The Novas suck too. So he would have only 1/8 of the health he has, and that would actually be a lot of fun. So guys, I have devised my own mental system for this tier system. I rank the 11 raids into 3 different tiers. So all 6 characters can pretty easily solo all of the tier 3 OP10 raids, of which there are 7. So that would be Digistruct Peak, Vermivorous, Haderax, Crawmerax, Master Gi, Dexiduous, and Pyro Pete. Those are the 7 tier 1 raids, 7 tier 3 raids that every single character can solo on OP10 with just some practice, right? No glitches, just practice and skill, and you can do it. Then I would say there are 2 tier 2 raids, and that would be Hyperius and Terramorphous. They are definitely harder than the others I just mentioned, but what I realized is that there's one tricky sequence with each of those fights, and once you figure it out, you can consistently beat them. So Hyperius and Terramorphous would be tier 2. Again, all the characters can beat them, but it takes a lot of practice and a lot of skill. And then the 2 tier 1 raids, in my opinion, would be the Dragons and Voracidous, and they are just extremely difficult for some characters to solo legitimately, or they require an insane amount of skill or practice. Again, it's doable, but extremely difficult. So that would be my own tier system, kind of how I think of the raid bosses. For Hyperius, you need to injure the bots to make them drop his shield. Be careful because they can reflect bullets back at you, so you can try to use weapons that don't reflect bullets, or you can just rely on like a Norfleet, which is another thing. If you don't like being incentivized to use meta gear, you're not going to like trying to solo OP10 raid bosses. Personally, I think it's great that the hardest content on the hardest difficulty incentivizes the use of certain loot in a loot-based game. It would really suck if none of the content in the game rewarded you for having really good gear. So if you don't enjoy that, nothing wrong with just staying at level 80. If you prefer that experience, there's nothing wrong with that. So here's the tricky part with Hyperius. Once you kill all the bots, or once you get him down to 25% health, he will enter this rage mode. And this is the tricky part. So when he jumps at you, you have to run away from him. And that is the pattern. That is the tricky pattern. Once you figure out how to do this, that is the only tricky part, and then you can beat him consistently. So you can see I just try to avoid his jumps. I try to get my damage off when I can, and it's kind of tedious and kind of slow, but you can consistently do it. So again, I try to draw aggro and get slag with Axton's turrets. So he's not, gonna be able to do this quickly, but you can do it consistently. And again, you get that massive damage off with the Tediore chucks in the beginning. So that's really nice. Now again, this fight does suck because of the 8 times health and the double novas. If you get rid of both of those things, I would really like this fight. But guys, if you can just figure out this pattern, just how to avoid that jump attack right there and then get your damage off, that is the key to beating this fight. Now, another issue with the raid bosses is, in my opinion, most of them aren't rewarding enough. in my opinion, they should be guaranteed to drop their rewards. So I do like, if you guys have watched my content in the past, I talked a lot about how I wish bosses in this game were harder but more rewarding, because I personally don't like fighting a weak boss 10 times just to get one drop. I would rather fight a tough boss once and be guaranteed to get his drop. So the raid bosses, most of them do drop worthwhile gear, but they're hard to farm, right? Because if they take too long to kill, or let's say you want a Norfleet from Hyperius, you would have to kill him, you know, dozens of times to get one on average. So I would change that. Some of them are very rewarding, but some of them definitely need adjustments. Now, Hyperius does drop Seraph Crystals, and he's guaranteed to drop one of his Seraphs. He drops like the Tattler, which is one of the best SMGs in the game. So Hyperius does have really good drops. He can drop legendaries, I think. But it's the fact that he takes this long to kill, he should be guaranteed to drop that stuff more. So I would even agree with the criticism that some of these raid bosses aren't rewarding enough, and I don't see the issue with having guaranteed drops from them, because again, they're raid bosses, they're tough, and they take a long time to kill. I personally don't think you should be able to kill them quickly. They should just be really rewarding when you do kill them. You know, some people take it for granted that every character should be able to easily melt raid bosses on the hardest difficulty. That take I do not agree with. Like, some people will say Borderlands 3 is better because of how easily, like, because of how high the power level of the characters are. That's not really something I agree with. You know, I think probably a difficulty between Borderlands 3 and Borderlands 2 would be ideal. I think a lot of people agree with that take. Another issue is, I just wish the B-Shield never existed in this game. I wish that from early on, Gearbox had realized what an issue it was going to be, and they would have nipped it in the bud then. So you can see Axton, like, Maya can slag with her action skill and deal more damage with the B-Hawk, so this section is easier for her. For Axton, you have to rely on your turrets for slag. You could probably also switch to a magic missile. You do need to hill swap the Novas, which again, I hate the Novas, that does suck. But if you can reliably hill swap the Novas, you could just use your grenade for a magic missile for slag that way. But when you do see he's doing the Nova, you do want to shoot with the Herald and then get your health back up with the Grog nozzle. And you can see we've almost got him killed. But yeah, I wish the B-Shield just never existed. So people say the game is scaled around the B-Shield. That's not true except for the raid bosses. They do seem to be scaled with the B-Shield in mind. And I wish that early on, when Gearbox realized the beast they had created, they had just changed it then. What I would actually do is make it a cursed item. So, you know, the Pirate DLC has the cursed items. I would add a line of red text that says, the glassiest of cannons, and while you're wearing the B-Shield, health gating is disabled, and you only have a fraction of your normal fight for your lifetime. Because it doesn't matter how weak the shield portion of the B-Shield is, when this game has such defensive mechanics that you get saved by health gate and fight for your life anyway. So they need to significantly reduce raid boss health, not balance the raid boss health around the B-Shield. And if they want to keep the B-Shield in the game, make it actually a risk to use. Right now, you're just stupid for not using it in a raid, or, you know, you're not using it if you want to do a challenge run for the most part. There are some exceptions, but, you know, that's for the most part. So I would significantly reduce the raid boss health so that they aren't balanced around the B-Shield, and I would make the B-Shield actually risky to use. That would open up more strategies for the raid bosses, and it would fix some of the stupidity of the B-Shield. Now again, Terramorphous, again, I consider him a tier 2 raid. Depending on your character, he is very difficult, and he does take a lot of practice. Oh, I did use a Flying Sandhawk for this fight, by the way. I didn't use a Flying Sandhawk for any of the other fights. But to compensate, I didn't use any other doll parts. But for this fight, again, I don't like the decision to make the slag to make the slag resistant. That's really annoying. But Axton, again, he can try to apply slag with his turrets. And you can try to predict when Terramorphous is going to rise out of the ground to throw your grenades and land your Sandhawk shots. Also, Terramorphous will rise from the ground exactly 30 seconds after you sound the horn, so keep that in mind. Another important thing about this fight is to kill those tentacles as fast as you can. If you don't, you'll get overwhelmed. Now, I personally don't really consider this spot a glitch spot, because look at those rocks. I mean, it's like they're perfectly designed to hit you in that cover spot, right? And enemies can spawn from that other angle and hit you. Something to keep in mind is that if you're actually in multiplayer, you can't all stay here. Only one of you can stay here. So I personally don't consider it a glitch spot. I think it adds to the fight, and I think it's, you know, better for the fight overall. Now again, Terramorphous is very tough. You do want to be taking these guys out quickly so they don't overwhelm you. But there's no reason that, for example, the other characters can't do what Axton is doing right now. Now, yeah, obviously Zero can melt him really easily. I've done it in 19 seconds on OP10. Obviously Salvador can. So rating is still character specific as far as their strengths and stuff. But it's not character specific in the sense that, you know, if you're playing Axton, for example, you'll have to glitch all the raid bosses. That's just not true. And then again, the dragons and Voracidous are really brutally difficult depending on your character. So I do think that the raid bosses should be easier. I've kind of already talked about that. I actually think it's okay that some characters are better at raiding than others. So for example, Zero, he's a glass cannon. A lot of people struggle to survive with him on OP10. But if you master that, then you gain access to a really great solo raider. So even that kind of works out. Obviously Gearbox didn't intend it to be that way, but it does kind of work out. Now that said, I do think every character should meet a minimum level of competence at the raid bosses that they all don't currently meet. So yeah, guys, I would change a lot of things about these. Maybe once, I think eventually I'll make a video for each raid boss and go in depth on the strategies needed for beating them. The thing is, I just don't know if there's much demand for that. Like, most of the community, they don't even want to beat them legitimately. Like, Starkiller has a really great rating video with Ma that I'll link to, and one of the most upvoted comments was something to the effect that, like, that's slow, bro, she sucks at rating, or something to that effect. Like, this is somebody who would just rather glitch the game with Salvador. So a lot of Borderlands players, they don't even care about doing these fights legit. Which is fine, but just because you don't want to do them legit doesn't mean they can't be done legit. And again, unless you're a very good player, a very experienced player, you are not going to enjoy attempting to solo OP10 raid bosses, and you really shouldn't even try. So for Terramorphous, again, you can just rely on this spot for cover, and the tricky spot is the fire phase. The hardest thing is when he comes up with all his fire tentacles, he can come up to the left side of where I'm standing at right here. And if he does that, they'll all start slapping you, and it's really hard to survive. But once you figure out how to survive that phase, you can beat him consistently, right? And the main key is to use like a Stormfront and a Grog Nozzle. So throw the Stormfront down when all those tentacles are mashing you, and hold your Grog Nozzle. You should be able to survive that way, right? It doesn't end up happening to me here, but that is something to keep in mind. So I'm going to do another video like this with Mai. In that Mai run, it does happen, and I'll be able to show you how I survived that. But yeah, when they all spawn to your left here and they start slapping you, just throw the Stormfront down, hold the Grog Nozzle, and you should be okay. For Axton, you can throw your turrets to try to get aggro relief. So again, Terramorphous is very difficult, but you can consistently beat him once you get good at the fight. Again, if I had my dream, if I could change this game the way I wanted to, the B-Shield would be a cursed item, and the raid boss health would be significantly reduced, so that they're not balanced around the B-Shield. So again, you can see I'm trying to quickly take out the tentacles with stuff like the Conference Call and the Lady Fist. But you can see I did not have to glitch any of these runs. And the Dragons and Voracidous can be beat legitimately with Axton. I'm just personally not good enough at it right now. I did it with Zero, but I can't do it with Axton or Mai yet. And that's another thing, guys, like, sometimes our skill level is just too low, unless we put the practice in, and I'm not willing to do that right now. So I just accept it. I accept that my skill level is currently too low for this content, for the Dragons and Voracidous. Some people, a lot of gamers, they have kind of fragile egos, and they can't say something like, I acknowledge that my current skill level is just too low to deal with something as difficult as OP10. A lot of them would rather play on it anyway to prove something to themselves, even though they hate it and don't enjoy it, which is nonsensical to me. But you know, here we are. It's okay to not be good at things, guys. There are plenty of things I suck at. But anyway, I got lucky this time, the tentacles did not spawn to my left, so I didn't have to use the Stormfront. But again, when I get to that Maya video, you'll see that. So here, Terramorphous will do a singularity, and as long as, if you're behind this cover spot, this is a great time to get a bunch of damage in. If you're out in the field, he'll pull you to him and kill you. How do those cover rocks work in the field? Do you guys know? I've tried to use them a little bit, and I got inconsistent results. So let me know what you think about if you can use the rocks in the field for cover from his attacks and stuff. Again, there are so many adjustments I would make to these fights, guys, but I enjoy them with Axton and Maya. I love them with Zero. And again, maybe eventually I'll make an individual video for each raid boss explaining more in-depth strategies and tactics. And maybe in that video I can kind of give my thoughts on how I would adjust them. Or maybe in the Maya rating video I can kind of elaborate on my thoughts on that, because I won't want to just repeat myself between the two videos. But anyway, guys, Axton is great at raiding. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please consider liking and subscribing. Have a good day, and I hope to see you next time.